The mornings are getting darker, the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting colder. That can only mean one thing: the jumps are back, and we've drafted in two of Timeform's finest in Dan Barber and Phil Turner to look ahead to the upcoming jump season, and they've very kindly picked us out 3 horses each from Timeform's Horses to Follow book who they're particularly excited about this upcoming season. Before we get started, don't forget you've got 50 to follow from the UK, 20 from Ireland, anti-pose tips, trainer quotes and much more, everything you need for the upcoming season for just $10.95, and it's available on Amazon now. So let's get stuck in, gents. Dan, I'm going to come to you first, and I believe you've got an impressive bumper winner at Wetherby to start off with.
I have indeed. This worked out pretty well last year. A horse called Strong Leader. I was down at Warwick for Racing TV, and this beautiful specimen walks into the paddock. Not me. It was a horse called Strong Leader. Stood out a mile. Duly won that day, and then went on to better things last season. I wonder if Indeevar Bleu, or Indeevar Bleu, if you're particularly au fait with Gaelic, might be the next candidate to do something similar for Ollie Murphy, because he created a massive impression in a bumper at Wetherby. The way he got into the race was most striking. The runner-up had a lot of experience, was ridden to make the most of it. But Indeevar Bleu, look at this. The others are absolutely flat out at this point. But this is a bit like most. It's one thing getting there going well, then can you deliver off the bridle? And I was absolutely blown away by the acceleration, despite inexperience. You can see his head on one side, running green, that this horse showed to accelerate as away as he did. Visually, probably the most impressive bumper winner I saw last season, and he's coasted through the last 50 yards as Sean Bowen takes it easy. I had an off-the-record chat with Ollie Murphy on track the other week, and he obviously holds this horse in extremely high regard, as does Sean Bowen. But it was an interesting piece that Ollie did, a bit of a trainer stable tour piece, and he was half suggesting he was elsewhere when this horse ran, and I think he was in a betting shop watching it on track, and he saw it was even money, and he think, well, we've not really done anything with him. It looks like an atrocious price, and then he goes out and wins like that. And it's a stable generally, I think. I Phil agrees that I think they've upped the game in the last 12, 18 months, and to have a horse like Strong Leader finishing second in an Atrian Novice hurdle was an achievement in itself, and I do think this horse has got an awful lot of potential.
Yeah, and the horse you mentioned there, another one of Ollie Murphy's. I think he only came 9th in the Supreme, but he was still best of the British, wasn't he, last year? So I think he's in good hands with these novice hurdlers. Yeah,
that's such an achievement nowadays, isn't it, for a British horse to finish in the first 10, so well done.
Yeah, indeed so.
Phil, your specialist subject when it comes to handicapping horses is the staying chasers, and I think you've gone over to Ireland for your first one.
Yeah, well, we're saying it's the start of the jumps. We're actually into the 6th month of the jump season, and it's particularly relevant in Ireland because there's been plenty of good racing on Irish soil, plenty of horses who'll probably be around for sort of bigger prizes during the winter. And one of them is Hollow Games, who ran in the big race of the summer, the Galway Plate. And he's quite far back here in the sort of the green hoops. And the key to the Galway Plate is you need to be handy, and this year's race was a prime example. There were 3 false starts. All the jockeys wanted a handy position. Danny Gilligan and Dally Mullins on the front 2 there, they were in the prime position throughout and dominated. And all the horses Hollow Games is around, all those also-rans, they were also in the front rank. I think only 3 of the hold-up horses made it into the top 10. He fared by far the best of those who was held up. He got shuffled back at the start. There was no criticism of the jockey, Sam Ewing, who just got absolutely mullered at the sort of standing start and was in the final third from the first fence onwards. He's done very well to finish there, particularly when you consider Galway's running is really, really gruelling. And that's the key to him, really. Things haven't quite gone to plan with him. He came with a big reputation. He won a point by a long way on his debut, then won his first 4 starts under rules, and they probably sort of entertained Grade 1 hopes with him. He's not quite made it to that level. And he lost his way a bit after winning his chasing debut last season. He's had a breathing up, but they were trying to sort of make a 2-miler out of him. Basically, he's a stayer. That's the first time he's tried a chip over fences, and he was doing all of his best work at the end. And look, there's lots of sort of valuable staying prizes in Ireland. Gordon Elliott has loads of darts to throw at these. I suspect he's going to be one of the main ones. And Dangerous Last Words, I think he's a horse, even if you don't get an immediate return with him, keep the faith. I think he's going to land one of these somewhere during the season. Obviously, he's been seen out over the summer, so he might not be fully primed for perhaps his autumn comeback, but I'd follow this horse in any of those big handicaps over the winter.
Yeah, just to add something on him, because that struck me as well. I think because he was so impressive around 2 miles in his chasing day when he jumped brilliantly, it seemed to lull them into thinking, oh, he must be a 2-miler now.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So they've been wasting time around that trip.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I'm not saying he's absolutely thrown him, but he's on a competitive market, it is, and I think there's further improvement to come given that longer trip.
So staying handicap chaser to follow there from Phil. Dan, back to you now, and I think you've got another bumper horse for us.
Yeah, well, this one's been looming on the horizon. I've been really excited about him since he made a couple of eye-catching runs in bumpers. In Yorkshire Man Sam is the horse in question. The closer to the time, I'm actually panicking a bit. Well, this was November. Why haven't we seen him since? So I'm hoping all is well. That's the key point. But yeah, I mean, you don't need to be Poirot to realise that this horse shapes like a stayer. The horse, that's an owner mate in the same silks. We'll recognise those from the Northern Circuit. But Yorkshire Man Sam puts in an extremely strong late burst that implies that he's very much a stayer in the making. Bumpers haven't really scratched the surface. He's from the family of a horse I'm sure plenty will remember for the late Malcolm Jefferson, According to Pete, who wore the same silks. He was just a really dependable hurdler chaser, likeable horse, and a horse who had a good amount of class as well. There's a concern over the absence, and I suppose a bit of a concern is he's just a bit lazy to shape as he has in a couple of bumpers, but I'm inclined to skew positive and think he just wants 2.5, and part of my motivation was a real, respect wouldn't be the right word, but an adoration would be going too far, but I rate Mark Walford so much as a trainer. He seems to be able to do it with anything, and I was keen to get one of his included. And Yorkshire Man Sam, I mean, there were a few options, but he was the most compelling.
So a nice steer in the making there, based in the north from Dan. Phil, you've got one next who didn't actually finish his race last time, but you think there's still a lot of wiggle room in his handicap mark.
Yeah, we've got a faller to talk about now. As Dan says, actually, about Mark Walford, another lower profile yard in Sam Drinkwater, who's proved that he can get the job done when he's got the ammunition. A horse called Ballybreeze here. In the yellow, they're coming up to the tricky third last at Market Raising, which has caught loads of horses out. It should be said, he also actually fell on his debut in a point, which is a slight concern when he was coming through to win that day.
You could have warned me about this, about the horses.
Oh, well, I do apologise. But the key thing to that is the third last, and the key thing with that is that BHA handicappers, they're only allowed to sort of take into late fallers from 2 out onwards. So they've got to ignore what happens here. And look, we think he would probably have won this race. You can see he's just almost going too well. As you can see, it's almost momentum takes him down. He clipped the top, and we've seen loads of horses come down there. I don't think there are fundamental issues with his jumping touch wood. And even if you just have him finishing somewhere near the winner, JJ Riley, he's allowed to race off the same mark. So I'm sure he's got plenty in hand of his handicap mark. He was really, really impressive when he won his chasing debut at Stratford last autumn. He was then put away for several. He came back and ran in the Arc. He had no chance in that, completely out of his depth. They were probably trying to pick up some prize money, given it was race was going to be cut up. But even the fact he was able to match stride with those horses for as long as he did reflects well on him. I think, look, he's not a superstar, but I think he's probably a 130, 140 horse, and he's of a BHA mark of 120, and if they sort of don't tilt at windmills and sort of campaigning realistically, he should be able to pick up a couple of races in the autumn.
Yeah, that was a really interesting one, that. He could be really well handicapped. Dan, coming back to you now so far, we've had 2 bumper horses. Are you going to make it a hat-trick?
Yeah, I'm sort of going a season after Phil here because of his final selection, who we'll mention in a second, did last year what I'm hoping the King of Ryhope will do this for Dan Skelton. I'm not sure I have a trainer above Skelton when it comes to horses jumping fences. Almost straight off the bat. You can almost, when Skelton decides that one's ready for fences, I'm almost inclined to add £10 to its hurdles rating straight away because whether it's schooling, whether it's the type of horse he buys, I don't know if it's a training method or what, here's the King of Ryhope, who just looks physically like a chaser. The horse in pink colours, the Chris Giles colours. He went through the race really strongly. The first 2 are dour stayers. This was a race, I think the first, certainly Lorca Williams' far side, got a bit whip happy late on and received a ban on the back of this. Collector's Item, the runner-up, he didn't perform on his chasing debut at Chepstow's opening fixture, but he was on his game that day. It was the way the King of Ryhope went through the race and was still travelling as well as any when he had to switch course between the last 2, and heavy ground at Haydock. That's really not what you want happening in a race like that. He was going into it as well on the back of not much conditioning. He'd had only 3 runs, but I see he's already entered over fences, isn't he, at this
Yeah, we're
week.
recording this before we've got decks for Thursday. It wouldn't be a surprise if he does get declared to see a little wind up next to his name. I don't think there.
Yeah, that would be fairly standard practice, but it's. I mean, as the one that Phil will mention was just a case in point. The skeleton horses are so well drilled when it comes to adapting to fences, and if they're going straight over fences with this horse early as well, and it is early, he's had only 4 or 5 starts, I think that's a big pointer in itself, but there's no way we've seen the best of him yet.
Yeah, Dan's already touched on your last one, Phil, another skeleton inmate. Now, I struggle with English, never mind French, so I'm going to leave the pronunciation to you on this one.
We think Frere d'Armes. It's French for brother in arms. So, look, let's start with the negatives here, because there probably are slight negatives with it. If you think back to its hurdling career, its novice hurdle campaign, that's slightly fizzled out. And at first glance, you could say the same about his chase campaign, because he sort of certainly bombed out in his last start. But I think you can turn that negative into a positive in the sense that, as a result of that, he's not as high in the weights as he would be. And as Dan's just mentioned, Skelton's probably the top yard in the country for sorting that kind of thing out. And if they get him right, this race at Newbury is unbelievably strong form. If you look at the horse he's beaten here, and he's knuckled down really well to beat Orkan Risk, who's a hard horse to get past. He came out later to win the Betfair hurdle back at Newbury late in the season. The third, That's All Right, Gino, came out and won the Future Champions in Air. And the fifth, just creeping out a shot, is Balco Coastal, who was run up in a Grade 1 later in the year. Now, all of those horses I've just mentioned are starting the new campaign on significantly higher marks. Balco Coastal, I think, £16 higher mark than he was in that race there. That's All Right, Gino's £11 higher. The horse who beat them comprehensively is only £7 higher because of the fact he didn't quite go the way as expected in his final 2 starts. He was off for a best part of 4 months after that. And we thought the way he raced at Ascot, he absolutely bombed through that race, looked miles ahead of his mark, came through to win his race and couldn't quite get the job done. We thought at the time, he just needed it more than expected. The fact a tongue strap came onto him on his next start and he disappointed at Ayr suggests there may have been other issues at play, but presumably a breathing op might take place during the summer. If they get him back on track, his first 2 chase starts, his win at Kempton was backed up by a really solid time figure. That form there, he's got to be well handicapped. And there are loads of really good sort of 2-mile handicap chases that they can aim at in the first part of the season. And I suspect he's got at least one big pot on him this winter.
Yeah, it's a Timeform thing to stress that as well. That division tends to be the weakest of handicaps around the 2-milers.
That's a bit of the reason I'm quite keen on Ballybreeze. It's generalisation, but they tend to be less competitive, the 2-milers. And if you get one which is going places and travels as well as this one, hopefully you've got a winner on your hands.
Yeah, some really interesting stuff there from the guys. I'm sure we've got plenty of winners in waiting. Just before we sign off, I want to recap on the horses' names for those people with your trackers and your notebooks. So from Dan, we've got Indeevar Bleu. Are we going?
I think we'll go Bleu.
We'll go Bleu.
Don't let your French fail you again. Come on.
Much more up my street. Yorkshire Man Sam and the King of Ryhope, Phil. We've got Hollow Games, Ballybreeze, and do you want to repeat that French?
Frere d'Armes.
Frere d'Armes we're going with for that. So before we sign off, don't forget 50 to follow from the UK, 20 from Ireland, anti-post tips, trainer quotes, everything you need for the upcoming jump season for $10.95, and it's available on Amazon now. Thanks for watching.